Hi, and welcome to Nutrition for Vegan Runners. I'm Ellie Busby, your host, and today I'm with Warren Renkel, who is an ultra runner and a UK running coach and a qualified sports and exercise nutritionist. He's also the founder and chairman of his local running club, Run Free Fell Runners, based in the place that I can't pronounce in North Wales. Warren, could you please pronounce it for me?
Yeah, based in Llangollen in North Wales.
Yeah, that's just never going to happen for me. But thank you for stepping in. And also, what's the name of your own practice, your own organization?
My coaching business is Run Llangollen as well. So we're based here. So
cool, great. So let's just dive straight in. As a vegan runner and an ultra running coach yourself, what is the biggest mistakes you see, or what is the biggest problem that runners or ultra runners come to you with?
I would say probably the biggest mistake that lots of people make is actually kind of not getting the nutrition strategy kind of nailed in from the start. And I think what happens is I'll get a lot of people come to me who've done a couple of ultras and have not managed to get their fueling right. And when we have a kind of sit down and a chat about it, I kind of say, oh, when did you start practicing? And it was kind of like, oh, well, I had an idea and I just went for it on race day. So I think that's the number one is, people tend to try to just do it on the day rather than a bit more practice for a couple of months going up to their event. That's probably the most relevant thing that I deal with them all the time.
That's quite surprising, actually. I've heard a lot of people go for marathons without thinking about it, without having a nutrition strategy or even a proper training plan. But when it comes to ultras, and especially if you're on trail or even fell running, that's like, I can't imagine doing something like that and not having a good plan, especially a nutrition plan. So yeah, I can imagine that people run into lots of problems when they start doing that.
Absolutely, because there's always a certain amount of fuel that they've got to take on, and I think the challenge changes the longer they go. So when you're just above a marathon, a 50k or a 30 or 40 miler, that looks very different to the people who maybe done some marathons and then jump straight into doing a 100 miler. Kind of take the same strategy over to that, and it's so different that I think that's sometimes how they come unstuck.
So what happens if you haven't got a good nutrition strategy and you just go into it without a plan like this? What can happen, or what do people come to you with the problem that's happened?
I think the two different scenarios is as they're approaching their race, they have not got any confidence because they're probably not fueling their kind of longest, most specific runs properly. And then the issue is that they know what food to eat, but they don't quantify how much they need to consume per hour to make the start to finish of that event. Because often when I sit down with people after an event who've just done an event who I'm taking on or doing a consultation with, they'll think they've eaten a certain amount of calories, and when you actually sit down and write it down with them, they're actually really surprised how little they've actually consumed over a 6 to 8 hour period. And then it kind of makes sense to them then why their kind of muscles weren't very happy with them halfway through the race.
So just to be clear, at the moment you're talking about fueling within the race, like in the long runs.
Yeah.
And you're totally right. It's like, it's really actually quite hard to eat enough. And you really have to train at eating or consuming energy while you're running, because it's quite a skill.
Absolutely. It's a real challenge. I mean, you really do have to train yourself to be able to just keep eating, because the longer you run for in an event, the last thing you actually want to do is eat. Even if someone put your favorite meal in front of you when you've been running for so many hours, you just don't want to eat anything. So you really do have to practice, and specifically on different terrain as well as finding out where is best for you to eat. If, for most people, it's going uphill if it's steep is the best time. to fuel, and that's another good thing to think about.
That's such a good point. It's like, I know that when I I naturally run better fasted. I just prefer it. Obviously, it can't be that far though. That's the problem. So I remember when I was training for an ultra a couple of years ago, the period of time I went through training to eat was so tough. Like, it's the last thing I wanted to do. But and at first, when you start doing it, you feel like your performance actually drops.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think if you're someone who goes from, if you do train fasted a lot and then you try to eat a lot, you will naturally feel bloated, because you'll be carrying a bit more. You're possibly carrying a bit more weight. You're carrying more fluids in your body, and you will have a period of time where your body does need to adjust to actually fueling itself that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose if your body is moving from like a state of ketosis, from that fasting state, to burning glucose directly, it's always going to be difficult because your body adapts so quickly to one thing, especially if you do the same thing over and over again,
Yeah,
which is great.
absolutely.
If you continue doing that one thing, it's great. But as
Yeah.
soon as your environment changes a little bit, it's like you're out of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also that key as well. There's a really popular way that lots of people train, where they kind of try to train low and race high. So they're training low all the time on a low amount of carbs, and then they'll go into a race and they will carb load basically. And I think sometimes it sounds much easier than that actually is, to make your body change really quickly. You really have to practice if you're going to do that kind of train low, race high strategy, because your body kind of doesn't know what you're kind of asking of it, really. It gets confused, I think.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that. I suppose some people find it easier than others to make the switch, but anyway. So on to what people should actually eat. Like, when it comes to what people should actually eat when they're in a race. A lot of runners turn to gels, but there are more and more people asking me now what alternatives are there to gels, because they don't want to fill their body with artificial stuff and sugar, and they don't want to use the packaging. So firstly, what are your thoughts on gels? And secondly, what are the alternatives for ultra runners?
I think gels are great, in scientifically, of how quickly the absorption is from them. They oxidate really quickly within your body. So, they're mainly because they're maltodextrin based, a lot of them. And they're very effective. You can see why people who run marathons use just gels, just gels or liquid fuel. But you're right. There are many more people now who are turning to whole food, and I think there's a really good argument, because you get very bored and very upset with gels quite quickly if you do it over a long time. I've got a friend who did a 60-mile 20-hour race on just gels, and I think he consumed like 80 gels or something, and I cannot imagine doing that. That is just awful. I don't think he could eat anything sweet for weeks. He was so put off. So whole foods is something I'm a big fan of using, and they're really easy to make. So I make lots of my own stuff for fueling. So just a mixture. So I make like cacao energy balls. They're really effective. Making things like flapjacks, and it's just making them palatable. So, I mean, there's lots of brands out there. It's very easy to buy the stuff off the shelf, but it's actually really easy to make your own, and you can use your own flavors. And I make all my own flapjacks and energy balls, and kind of like fruit balls as well. So things with like just dates and things like that. And they're really, really effective. And there's a little bit of a nice feeling about eating them, because they taste better and it's proper food. Just that feeling of sucking the fluids out of a plastic wrapper every 20 minutes gets really, really boring.
I can imagine, personally, actually, I've never used gels myself, but I can imagine it's a lot easier on your digestive system using gels, because you don't have to deal with all of the fiber and the rest of the stuff that comes with the whole foods and in the
No,
kind of
that
recipes you're talking about.
yeah, I think that's what makes them so easy. That a lot of the time there's a very low risk of kind of GI distress, and like you say, it's really simple. And I think gels have improved over the past 5 or 6 years, where they used to be quite sandy and bitty, whereas now they seem to come in a more jelly format rather than the thick stodge that they used to be, and they're very easy to consume. And I think that's why a lot of the new people who make them have made them that way, so that they're more friendly. They're more like jelly. See, it's no effort to actually to take them on. It's just that you get very sick of them quite quickly.
So you were talking about some whole food options. What do you normally put in a flapjack, for example, that you'll take on a run?
So normally a flapjack, I would normally put, so it would be rolled oats. I'd chop up some dates, be some peanut butter, some cacao, and then just kind of mix that all up in a blender, with probably with a little bit of kind of plant-based butter and stuff like that. And then sometimes we've had bits of more fruit in it, so like sultanas and dates or aubergines, and just mash it all up together in the blender, and then just put those in the oven and make it. It'll make kind of 10 or 12 flapjacks, and that from the oats and the fruit, you're going to be getting a good stabbing of kind of 30 grams, 40 grams of carbs per one, but also because of the fruit that's in there as well, you're kind of mixing glucose with fructose, so that will, your body absorbs it quicker if you mix up your carbs as well. So I find them quite effective.
That's such a good point about mixing the types of sugars, because that's the good
Yeah,
thing about gels, right? You have like the four different types of sugars which are absorbed by different transporters in your gut, which is why they are
yeah,
so efficient. So you
yeah.
can get that balance with whole foods too.
Absolutely, yeah. You can, if you kind of spend a little bit of time and look at the right ingredients. I think that's sometimes why some of the off the shelf flapjacks aren't as effective, because they'll kind of be just one. They'll just be oats, and the rest will just be flavorings rather than actually a different type. But if you make them yourself and mix them up with fruits, like you say, you do get the different carbs, and it makes a big difference. Makes a big difference.
You also had quite a bit of fat in there. Well, you had some peanut butter and a bit of plant-based butter
Yeah,
as well, which, you know, you when I think of making whole food snacks for running, I'm always like, well, I don't need the fat right now. Actually, that might be a hindrance because it's extra bulk and I'm not going to be burning it straight away. So, do you actually need that fat?
I think it very much depends on how long your event is. I think if it's a shorter event, if you're fueling for 3, 4, 5 hours, you may not need that. I think if I've got someone training who's going beyond the 10-hour plus and 12-hour plus kind of running, then I would say to them that they've got to have some fat and some protein in there. I would try maybe sometimes to keep to kind of better quality fats, nothing that's unhealthy fats. But yeah, I think when someone's going longer, I think it is important to have just enough in there. And I think go back to the same point of training your stomach, is training your body to be able to deal with a little bit. But yeah, so for longer distance, certainly, I think there is a benefit to having just enough in there to help your body process things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fat's a funny one, isn't it? Because I speak to so many athletes and so many runners who cut down on their fat because they want to make room for carbs, which is fair enough because that's where you're getting most of your energy from. But my personal experience is that when I introduce more fats into my diet, like through my whole diet, like the hours before my run and recovery, my performance improved, my injury rate went down. So I saw a huge difference from adding more whole food fats. Is that something? Well, what's your experience with this, with yourself or with anyone you work with?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is still a nutritional benefit to to keeping your fat levels, or even in training, and even when you're actually on a really long distance event, is that you are putting some fats in there that in training. I think it's really beneficial. I think some people sometimes go very very low on fat, and then they find themselves wondering why they're getting colds and they're feeling down and stuff. And it's because, fats has a big impact on your immune system and your ability to absorb nutrients and things. So it's a really important fact. It's, everyone wants to be lean, ultra runners, we want to be light. And, if someone's saying to us that we look gaunt, then we know training's going well and all that sort of thing. But still, managing your fat levels is still really important.
I'm going to say one word to you: water.
Yes.
Tell me about water.
So it's a massive conversation, and it water, as I realise, about this with people all the time. And now I'm a massive fan of electrolytes. I'm a huge advocate of electrolytes, and I know some people don't always like them or like having them, but I will always try and convert people to mixing 50-50 between electrolytes and water. It's really, I kind of go on the rule of someone in training to be trying to consume a mil of water per calorie a day. So I say if I've got them on a 2,200 a day calories, then just over 2 liters of water a day I would say to them, is their kind of minimum. I mean, it's always adaptable in ways, but I would get them to like that as a minimum. Similar when they're kind of out training is a mil per calorie what goes in, because if you can put as much food in it as you want when you're running, if you're not putting adequate fuel in for that food to actually pass into your gut, then it won't go in. And I think that's a big reason for people who have GI distress in long distance running, is that they just don't drink enough. They've got to, for every gel, I would say it's always about 300 mils of water, and every hour they should be taking a minimum of 500 mils of fluid when running. So, and, post run, I think lots of people fall into that funny habit of after sessions, they'll come home and just smash down two pints of water. And they always say, I just go straight to the toilet straight after. And I say, well, it's because there's nothing in that water really that your body wants after a session. It wants nutrients. So you're much better to drink some electrolytes post session or after a race or after a run, and because your body will want some of it. There's loads of studies out there that say actually if you were to drink a pint of water and a pint of Diet Coke after a hard running session, your body would actually take more fluid from the Diet Coke than it would the water, because there's something in it. It might not be brilliant for you really, honestly, but your body's like, there's stuff in that, so I'll actually retain it for longer and see if there's anything I can get from it.
That's the huge problem with dehydration, isn't it? Actually, drinking plain water doesn't help. If you're already dehydrated, it
can make it worse. Yeah, it can make it worse. I mean, I've done lots of long races when it's been blisteringly hot, and you're on the mountainside and you get to a stream and you dunk your head in and you drink loads and loads and loads of spring water because you're waiting to get to the next checkpoint because you've run out. And within 5 minutes, you're as dehydrated as you were before you stuck your head in that stream and drank loads of water, because your body needs, it needs the nutrients. It doesn't really need the fluid as much as it does the nutrients.
Okay, so every runner should be using electrolytes.
That was certainly my vote. Yeah, certainly. I'm a massive fan of using electrolytes. So I even drink them at home every day. So every day I will have like a pint of water what's got 3 electrolytes tablets in, whether I'm training or not, because it's really good for you. Really good for you.
Yeah, I have to say I saw a huge improvement when I started with electrolytes. I mean, it got to a point when I was training for an ultra in the summer, it's really hot, and you just can't drink enough water and you just feel awful and fatigued, even though you're eating and drinking. But then as soon as electrolytes were involved, that kind of went away. So It is incredibly important, and you might not even realize how important it is until you try them and you realize, then
Yeah,
you see the difference yourself.
yeah, absolutely.
So, what are your someone who's new to ultra running? Lots of people are trying ultra running this year. Lots of people have races booked in. What are your top 5 nutrition tips for people, anyone who's new to ultra running?
5 top nutrition tips is the first one would be to count their calories when they're going out and training, and start from the start, actually counting how many calories they're consuming whilst they're actually out running, and make a note of it, even if it's like a little diary. That would be my thing to keep and use as a record for your training, to know what works. Another one is the utilization of protein, of how important protein is post session. If you're progressing from a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon up to ultras and kind of endurance running, you're putting your body under a massive amount of strain. And I know short distance runners will often say, "Oh, well, ultra runners are running slower, it's not as hard," and all that sort of thing. But it's nonsense. Running for hours and hours puts a huge strain on your muscles, and you really need to think about fueling up after your sessions, with the right amount of protein and the right amount of carbohydrates, and kind of get rid of the myths of you shouldn't eat carbs at night and that carbs are your enemy and all this sort of thing, and really concentrate on your fueling.
Oh my God, you're so right. There are so many foods and just things in general that are demonized. And it's like people try and avoid them, carbs, electrolytes, all of these things. And actually, they're incredibly useful and really important for ultra runners.
Yeah, very, very useful. Another one of my big kind of things is to decide whether your hydration plan and your kind of food plan is the same plan, or if it's 2 separate plans. That's a big thing that I talk to people, and try to understand where, because you can get lots of carbohydrates from fluids and have drinks that have got carbohydrates in, and that can make it quite easy to get carbs into you if you're not yet used to putting, because it's not always easy to go out and run and eat flapjacks if you're not used to it. So having 2 different strategies where you're getting your carbs from food and from fluids, opposed to just from foods and then just drinking, I think that's a good avenue for people who are new to it to explore, to see and then they will know what works for them best.
That's really interesting. So you recommend that people kind of try 2 different strategies and maybe even have a fallback strategy of getting your carbs from fluid if it's not working for you from food.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a few kind of the elite coaches that are always kind of saying, you need to pick your strategy from day one and stick to it. But I think it's always good to have a backup plan, really, because you never know how your body can react. So if you know that you can get your carbs from fluids as well, then it's always a good plan B in a long race.
You brought up something really important there, which is, don't just necessarily do the one thing that you're told, because and just experiment with your own body, because everybody is different. So, other people may have more knowledge than you, of course, but there are always different options, and your body is just different to everyone else. So you need to figure out what works for you.
Absolutely, yeah. It is and things can change as well. Things can change very quickly. I mean, when I did my Bob Graham, not last year, the year before, I trained with a particular flapjack that I'd been buying. They were in a local shop. They were just a kind of non-branded vegan flapjack. And I trained with them for weeks and weeks and weeks on end in preparation for my Bob Graham. And then when it came to my Bob Graham, I ate half of the first one and I couldn't stomach them for the whole day. And I had to completely change and change. Obviously, I'd got plenty of food there with me with the support crew to change, but it just shows that I'd practiced with those flapjacks and ate dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And then on the day, I just couldn't stomach them at all, which was really bizarre. And I've never eaten one since.
All right, always have a plan B. Good to know. That's so weird though. I guess like
Yeah,
on the day, there's it's completely different. You've got a lot
yeah.
of there's a lot of stress hormones going around your body. There's excitement. Your gut's going to be different. So yeah, it makes total sense. What give us if you have one, do you have a personal story of or a story of someone that you've worked with who's come to you at the beginning and they were like, they were having issues and you worked with them and like just take us through the journey that you went through.
On a nutritional basis, there's a guy who I'm working with for a while, and I still work with him now. And he's progressed from kind of short races up to much longer races. And we've always had the very kind of common discussions about getting cramps, cramps in their calves and cramps in their quads when they're doing the long runs. And it's so publicized now on the internet about, cramp is always salt and it's always something to do with sodium or something like that. And I always try to say, you have to rule out the very basic of things first. And that's just that you're not consuming enough carbs and that you don't have the strength and you're just exceeding your, the eccentric load of your muscles. And over months and months, we took his longer runs further and further and further and worked on how many carbs he was having. I made him keep a diary so that he knew exactly how many carbs. And then within three or 4 months, he's out running now, training for a 75-mile race, and he's running up to kind of 6 or 7 hours. He's got his fueling spot on, and he just doesn't have the cramps anymore. And it's all just down to keeping a diary of what he was eating and coming back to me with it. And I say, yeah, that's the perfect amount. And obviously there's little other contributing factors like bits of strength work and stuff like that. But actually getting his carbohydrate intake and his hydration intake right over a long period of time has kind of transformed him as a long distance runner, certainly. And it's as well, the big thing is it's about confidence, because there's nothing worse. You can train as much as you want, but if you don't go into a big race with some confidence, then often you will struggle anyway. It's a battle of the mind sometimes in long distance running, and to give someone that confidence from them actually seeing that they've actually got in their mind, they've seen something change because they've changed something and now they feel different and stronger. That then is a great mental bonus when they go into a long distance race, and they know how to fuel as well. But that mental confidence is huge, and he's kind of really pleased with his progression. So, and it's from something as simple as just writing down what he eats and eating more. He was way down on how many carbs he was consuming, and once he got the levels right, it was great.
We love to think that there's one single answer to our problems, don't we? And that's why, it's so tempting to just go to Google and find out what that one answer is to cramps or whatever else. And usually when you type in about cramps, it's magnesium, but you're totally right. It could be so many other things. It could be calcium, it could be magnesium, it could be water, it could be carbs, like fueling, anything. And it's, if you don't have a professional to support you like that, though, what if you don't have a coach? What would you suggest to people if they're experiencing issues?
I think it's to try one thing at a time. Explore the different options, because like you're exactly right, it could be lots of different things. The thing with ultra running, especially if you're new to it, is that you're actually pushing the boundary on everything. So you're overloading your muscles more than you've loaded them before. You've probably never had to eat that much, never had to hydrate that much, never had to train that hard. You're tired. So there's so many different things. And I think it's to pick one thing at a time and not try to not go out on a run and eat loads and have loads of salt and have loads of water and do all the different things and not know really what fixed it. So it's kind of to do one thing at a time. Look at your salt. I think lots of people who are actually on a vegan or plant-based, if they're what I would call a a home cooking someone who cooks a lot, you really do have to actually look at your salt, because if you don't eat junk food, you tend to not have a lot of salt naturally. It's not a derogatory thing, but if people eat lots of junk food, 9 times out of 10, they won't ever really need to worry about salt because there's so much of it in there. But if you make lots of fresh food yourself, actually your salt levels might be quite low. So you may actually need to actually up your salt.
Yeah, it's important to remember that we can taste salt for a reason, because in natural foods it's not very prevalent. You don't get much sodium. So
No.
we can taste it because that helped us seek it out. So yeah, you're
Yes.
totally right. If you're on a whole food plant-based diet, there isn't much salt and you really need to make sure you're getting enough. This is
Yeah,
such a good point. I'm
absolutely.
very glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I do speak to a lot of people who are following a whole food plant based diet, and you think if you're doing that you've got everything covered. It's the most natural diet. You're eating really healthily, and everything's covered. But actually, that's where, as a nutritionist, I see a lot of the problems with a vegan diet, because you can miss out on certain nutrients that would be added to processed foods, or processed foods would be fortified with. So yeah, even if you're having a whole food diet, that's really where you need to pay attention.
You really do. I mean, there's the few standout things, isn't there, like iron and B12 and different things. And you do have to keep one eye, especially as runners are, very prone to having low iron because of losing iron out of your feet. Most people would never even have heard of that when you say to them that you lose iron out of your feet, and they would have no idea what that meant. And so looking at that is, I mean, iron's very complicated in it, but you're absolutely right. You do need to have a good. Yes, it's great. You consume lots of veg and all that, but you still have to vary. Where you're getting your food from, and the difference between what's a whole protein and what's not a full protein, and having to mix different vegan proteins to get that full complex protein. And there's still a lot to. Yes, it's health wise, it's very good, but like you say, there's still a lot to try and keep track of to make sure you're getting everything that you need.
It's a good point about iron. Yeah, you're totally right. You do actually rupture red blood cells as you're running. Usually, runners have increased absorption. Your body kind of regulates itself, but some
Yeah,
people are. I mean, I work with genetics, so my company provide genetic testing to people so they can start personalizing their nutrition, and it's especially useful for runners or anyone who's into fitness. And iron is one of those things which has to be super personalized, because some people
yeah.
are very susceptible to anemia and really struggle with a plant-based diet, and especially with the running added on top of that. Whereas other people, never have to think twice about iron. I'm one of those people. I have increased absorption due to my genetics, so I've
Yeah,
never been anemic, and I never even
I'm the
have to think
same.
about it.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. So I've had my kind of genetic DNA profiling done for nutrition to test all my different absorption rates and things. And it's a really, really interesting subject, that one person can be so different in terms of how susceptible their body is to absorbing different nutrients. It's actually really interesting.
What was the most interesting thing you found out about yourself from that?
Mine was actually how good my body is at actually managing carbohydrates, which is quite interesting, because a girl who I coach, she's my girlfriend as well. She's type 1 diabetic, so I have a lot of fun discussing nutrition with her, because it's her type 1 is so complex, and we talk about the fueling and things. And when I've worn her Libra sensors before that she uses to monitor, and whereas hers is quite up and down, mine was just a flat line constantly. My sugar levels never ever changed; they just stayed totally solid. And I was like, I'm wondering if that doesn't work right. And when I had my DNA profiling for nutrition done, one of the things that came out was said that my body is just super good at managing sugar. It will just manage it perfectly. And I think that's why I find fueling easier than lots of people, because my body does a good job with sugars. I mean, how they do all that sort of thing is a bit above my pay grade, to be fair, and my kind of skills and knowledge. But it was really interesting. And then another one of mine was that my B12 is that I have a very low absorption rate of B12. So I have a protein shake, what's made by that company, which has got kind of 300% of the like RDA amount of B12 in it. So it's made specifically for that. So that was quite interesting because I'd never known that I would have been low, to be fair. And I've never been low, but now I have that just in case.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with B12 is that you don't want to be low. You want to make sure
No.
that you don't get low. So
Yeah.
you want to be supplementing before. Like, I speak to people who've had a blood test, and I mean, there are lots of reasons with this that I'm not going to go into, but total B12 is not a good measure of your active B12 level in the first place. But then they're like, well, my B12 levels were fine. So, you know, I'm just going to continue. I'm like, no, you need to be supplementing
Yeah.
every day now because you're
Yeah.
vegan. You're not getting it from your diet and you do not want to be low in B12.
No, it's a long way back.
It
It's a long way
certainly
back
is.
if you do get low. So
Yeah. And you can get permanent nerve damage if you
yeah.
if you become low. So yeah, it surprises me how many people I recommend to supplement B12. But yeah, if you're listening and you don't supplement B12, I'm telling you now, please supplement
Absolutely.
B12.
You really should be. And you know, even if they anyway, whether it's you know, sprays or tablet, but just try and, you know, it's something to certainly, if you're vegan or plant based, absolutely, it's something you should look into and make sure you are making a solid effort, especially if you feel like you'd struggle with fatigue or anything like that. That would be my first place to make sure I was on point, really.
It sounds like you've got a lot of stuff covered with the people you coach. I'd be very happy to have you as my coach, I have to say.
Yeah,
Usually
hopefully they feel the same.
And it's cool that you've also had a DNA test. There's not many people who have gotten into this side of their training yet. So I think it's still becoming popular. So it's really cool to hear that you've had a good experience.
Yeah, I think it is something that's on the up because I don't think there's many places that do it. So I mean, that may have changed now because I think there will be more and more do it now. But yeah, I think it's something that's definitely a growing market, certainly.
What's one thing that you would recommend that people could do, runners could do today to improve their nutrition?
I would say to look at their protein and fat ratio in their diet. Look at the percentages because I think it's the you know, carbs. Most people will get carbs, and you can always work on people with carbs. It's really easy, but sometimes changing someone's fat and protein is a bit more complex. And I think people always assume that they consume more protein than they do, and they think they consume less fat than they do. So I think looking at those two of how much fat and how much protein can be a real game changer in your nutrition. As I think lots of people don't have enough protein and lots of people eat too much fat. Not necessarily in an unhealthy way. It's just that fat builds up very quickly. You look at the typical day that I give someone in terms of how many grams of fat, and you can consume that in the first 3 hours of the day without even realizing, just with a good breakfast and a few snacks. And that daily amount of fat you're allowed is gone. It's so easy to have too much. So that would be my number one top tip, especially if you're wanting to change your physiology, if you're wanting to become leaner or kind of build more different muscle fibers and things, is your protein and your fat that would be where I would go to make a drastic change.
Thank you so much, Warren. You've given us so much to work on in this podcast. Seriously, I've really enjoyed this. Finally, tell us a bit more about you, where we can find you, where you are on social media, everything else.
Yeah, so you can find me online in a few different places. So my business is Run Llangollen, that's based in Llangollen. It's simple, www.runllangollen.co.uk, and you'll find me on Instagram, the same name. So I'm at @wazza_running coach. But you will probably see me around. So I organise a few events. I've taken over the Welsh 1,000 metres race this year. I'm chairman of the local club, Run Free Fell Runners. So If you want to find me, it's quite easy to find me. There's not many people with my name either, so Warren Renkel is quite uncommon. So yeah, if you ever anyone wants to chat to me about anything, I'm sure I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. You don't by any chance do running retreats, do you? I really fancy going for a running retreat in
No,
your area.
do you know what? The thing, I looked at doing some stuff like this a couple of years ago, and I'd spoken to a couple of local places about doing it. And one of my friends who I used to work with, he owns a glamping site, which isn't that far from me, over in Llangollen, the other side of Oswald Street. And I really thought about it, but then everything changed, didn't it, when COVID came, and so anything like that all kind of went under the carpet for a while, and it's still there, to be fair. So in the future, yes, certainly, because I'd like to do a mixture of things like that, where to try and give people a bit of everything. So teach people about strength and conditioning and about nutrition and about running, and because I think people aren't often taught to run anymore. That they just go for a run and they don't learn to run. So, and there's a lot. I'm a bit of a running geek. I love stuff about biomechanics and technique and stats, and I love all that stuff. So yeah, I hope in the future, maybe watch this space, and maybe at some point I will get that out from under the carpet and start thinking about it again.
I'm going to be emailing you every couple of weeks now. Like, Warren, have you thought about this again yet?
The thing is, it's so beautiful here. Where I am is so beautiful as well. It would be so easy to do it. I'm just surrounded by mountains here, so it's good. It's great.
I just imagine like a week of running there and learning about all these things, like having lessons and running and eating good food. It would be fantastic. Anyway,
yeah, it's the perfect holiday.
It is perfect. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
No, it's great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been a great chat.
Bye.
Cheers now. Take care.
If anyone is listening who is interested in getting a DNA test, just pop over to vojo.health, where we offer DNA testing, which is specifically for people on plant-based diets. So it's making sure that you're getting the right advice for your diet and lifestyle, which is something that I saw was missing in other DNA testing companies. So that's an area that I really, really wanted to cover. So yeah, if you're interested, go check it out. We've got lots of information about it.